if you create enough video content to get people to come to you. I think if you have like a really solid strategy, I think you start to see results within 3 to 6 months. If you were consistent and you had a really clear strategy and you were pointed with that time, you would make a world of difference in, as little time as 3 months, I would say. Where are your candidates on social media? Where are they spending time online? Where are they spending time offline? What events and conferences can we go to? It's not about being known by everybody. It's about being known by the right people.
Hello, Joel. Welcome to the Hiring on All Cylinders podcast. Great to have you.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
So if the audience haven't seen you, they're probably living under a rock somewhere because you're all over the place, whether it's TikTok or Twitter or LinkedIn. You've done an amazing job at building your brand, and I know you work with lots of other companies to do the same. So I thought we could talk about the importance of brand building, content marketing, and how you see that going and the trends for the future. So I guess, how did you start doing this? Like, why did you see it as being something important and a problem to solve?
Yeah, great. Obviously, being a recruiter, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, mostly on the LinkedIn recruiter side, but on my breaks, like I'd take a break every couple hours and I would just scroll the news feed. And I started seeing content. This was like 2019. I started seeing a lot of content around video content and the importance of video on LinkedIn. And, in my experience in recruitment, everything was kind of outbound. So sending in mails, emails, phone calls, started an agency. So obviously that was the focus, was sales minded. Even though I was reaching out to candidates, everything was like that outbound sales focus. And I think one of the biggest challenges for me in doing that, like anyone who's in outbound, was I just hated that we get rejected all the time. And it's probably the least favorite part, right? When you reach out to someone and you get rejected. Messages isn't bad, but cold calling for sure. You get people frustrated with you. And so I started seeing this content, and basically these people on LinkedIn would just talk about how if you create enough video content, you get people to come to you. And I funny enough, right before I started like officially creating content, I tried a couple of posts on LinkedIn, and the first post didn't do anything. So I just was like, oh, they were just lying. It didn't work. But the more and more I saw this content, I started realizing like I am seeing these people all the time, and they're convincing me that video content works. And so I honestly, I just thought if I could get people that I'm recruiting to know who I am, it would just make my whole life easier. And then if I could get people to reach out to me for help with recruitment, I could get bigger sales commissions. I could get more placements. And so, but then I looked at our own business, the business I was in, and the company I was working for at the time was like a boutique RPO, they had an hourly billing model, which is a little bit unique. So they're kind of disruptive within the industry in that time period. But it was like nobody was doing anything on social media. So it was this funny idea of like, I work for a really disruptive company, but no one's doing anything on social media. And so I just saw a need and within the business and went, you know what, I'll just start posting then every day on LinkedIn. And it just started with LinkedIn. And really from that point, it's just expanded from LinkedIn to other platforms. It took a while for me to really understand how and why content works. But I just inherently, I think based on my own behavior, realized I'm listening to these other people. So I it's possible for other people to listen to me. And that's really where I started. So that was in 2019.
Oh, wow. And how long did it take you, posting and putting in the work to develop your brand before you noticed like a real shift in those things that you wanted, like people coming to you, starting to generate more revenue or get the results, better results?
Yeah, I think, the challenge with this is like the timing of when I started. So I started creating content 6 months before the pandemic. Okay. No one's used the P word in like 2 years now, but remember when that whole thing happened in 2020? And around that time also, I left the agency I was with. So I started creating content. 6 months later, I left the agency I was with, and this was literally March 2020. So right as I started a new agency, the pandemic hit, and that kind of shifted everything. So I really didn't start to see results. Probably about a year is real, but I think that's because, again, the timing of everything, right? Because just during the pandemic, it was just like it was such a weird 6 months within recruitment where it was like nobody really knew anything going on. And I know a lot of even agencies, like there was like that 6 month window where everybody kind of struggled. So it took me about a year to really start to see inbound. But I think now when I'm working with clients, and yeah, I think if you have like a really solid strategy, I think you start to see results within 3 to 6 months. But again, it's based on like how strong is your network and like how much credibility do you have within your own network. But I would say 3 to 6 months is probably a good timeline for most people to expect to see some real tangible results, right? People that don't know you, that you've never talked to, reaching out to you.
Nice. So if you're a talent leader and you're excited about the potential of harnessing brand building, content marketing,
Yeah.
To generate better results, like what would be some of the kind of first steps you could take, or how should you be thinking about it in terms of using that in your team?
For sure. I think the first thing you got to think about is where are your candidates really spending time when they're on social media? Like I just read in my one of the books I'm reading right now, the guy just stated that I think people spend 2.5 to 3 hours a day on social media. So we know people are on social media. It's just figuring out where are your candidates on social media. Is it LinkedIn? Could be TikTok, could be YouTube. I think really figuring that out though is the first step. Second thing you want to do is, once you figure out where they are, like what kind of content are they already consuming on those platforms? This is another big piece that gets skipped. I think a lot of times when people start producing content, they automatically start thinking of like what they think people want and what they think people are going to engage in, instead of literally just looking at where are they now and what type of content are they into. And then starting to figure out from what you can offer people and what your company offers people, how you can start to produce content through that lens. So it's where are they, what type of content are they consuming, and then how can you tell your story in a similar way to the content that they're already into. So it's kind of like research. To me, the best way to do that is just to look up like thought leaders, people who already have audiences in whatever space you're looking to reach, and just understanding like why do people gravitate towards them? What is it? Is it about the message, their delivery, maybe it's the editing, and then start to figure out how can we do a similar thing with whatever our employer brand is, or whatever whatever our kind of advantage to working with us is going to be.
Yeah. And is this like a huge commitment for people? Is this like a very expensive thing to do? Like, does it take a lot for these companies to generate results and get started?
I don't think so. I think it just takes consistency in small chunks over a long period of time. So I think if you add up all of the time that you're going to spend, yeah, it is a lot, but you're breaking it up into like, daily work. So the way I approach it is you've got a team of 10 people, all 10 people, or the majority of the 10 people are working together collectively. That's when you start to see results. I think what we're starting to see is like 1 or 2 recruiters at a company or on a team starting to kind of build a brand, which funnily enough, I think a lot of the content that's put out is actually like really good content for other recruiters, but we still haven't figured out like, how do you become the recruiter that's putting out really great content for software engineers or developers or marketers or salespeople? Not many recruiters I know have done a really great job at being known as like the sales recruiter or the tech recruiter. But there's a lot of recruiters that have kind of built brands that really attracts other recruiters. But if you collectively as a team are working together, I think you're not then worrying about one person. It's like as a team, you're able to work together and have that collective strategy. And I think as far as time goes, I would say 15 minutes to half an hour a day. If you were consistent and you had a really clear strategy and you were pointed with that time, you would make a world of difference in, as little time as 3 months, I would say.
Talentful provides flexible recruiting solutions to the world's most ambitious companies. Are you thinking about ways to add flexibility to your talent function? With recent market volatility and hiring set to return to growth mode in the near future, there's never been a better time to choose the right partner to help you scale. Talentful's embedded sourcing, recruiting, coordination, and talent advisory services have been trusted by the world's leading brands. Companies such as Atlassian, Microsoft, Expedia, Pinterest, Waymo, and more. Whether you're hiring across engineering, go-to-market, or G&A, Talentful has got you covered. To find out how Talentful can help you, visit talentful.com.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you make that distinction of there's quite a few people who've built a very popular brand online as recruiters, but probably are attracting other recruiters and are popular in those circles. But it kind of goes back to your first point and really understanding why you're doing this and who you're trying to target, and that it's not just a popularity contest. You should be doing it for a purpose. And I think you're absolutely, when you said that, it just made me think, okay, yeah, I actually know quite a lot of people who are in the recruitment space that I think are very popular with other recruitment people, but I can't really think of any that are like the go-to software engineering recruiter or the go-to design recruiter. So it still feels like there's quite a lot of room to make an impact there. Would you say, even though there's a lot of people trying to build content?
Look, there's so much room and market share. I just think of I think the go-to person that people think about when it comes to brand and content is Gary Vee, right? Gary Vee is like the godfather. I asked my next door neighbor the other day, they were doing like rummage sales, and they like do rummage sales and they sell stuff. And I'm like, oh, kind of like Gary Vee does. And they were like, who's Gary Vee? They didn't even know who he was. So that should give you an indication that there's always market share. And also, I think you need to just reframe like what success looks like. It's not about being known by everybody. It's about being known by the right people. Like if you, let's say your target, you look at your target list of candidates on LinkedIn, right? You do the talent insights and you go, all right, there's 30,000 software engineers in my city. The goal isn't to get 10 million other people who aren't software engineers. It's literally those 30,000. So like, how do you go about that? And I think digital it's a big part of that, right? Leveraging digital, but also your direct email, direct in-mail, events, in-person events. And it's just looking at like your overall strategy. I think digital content is best for nurturing rather than starting relationships. I actually think a better way to start relationships is to go out and meet people, and then you use the content to nurture them. And I think this is the piece that people get confused, because there's a lot of online branding people that are like, get leads. I actually think content's way better for just nurturing and being top of mind. And I think that's an important distinction to make as well. So it's not just about new connections. It's looking at your existing network and how do I nurture and strengthen and become that top of mind for whenever they're making that career decision.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that there's been a real push. I think the pandemic accelerated this, but obviously a big move to remote. And I know you have some strong feelings about hybrid and remote work. And that meant that a lot of events and a lot of the ways that people interact has also gone digital and gone remote. How are you seeing that trend at the moment? Like, are you feeling like most of the relationship building's going to happen online? Do you think that there's going to be a trend that moves somewhere else? What are you seeing recommending for companies in terms of getting that brand out there?
I think, and we see this a lot in the sales tech space. For some reason, I think for whatever reason, like that tech space and salespeople there, it's like you see a lot of trends, because they were the ones I feel like that really led like the personal branding, and they're like, all right, build a personal brand as a salesperson, and you can unlock conversations easier with prospects. I think what we're seeing in that space is a lot more of these micro events and just events in general. Like I think there's a big push for in-person. And so I think as a recruiter, if I'm thinking about this, again, I'm looking at those 30,000 software engineers and I'm thinking, okay, how can I set up some kind of event they're interested in. It's networking where I can start to just make connections and, make that initial connection with them. And then once you have that initial connection, that's when you can kind of nurture them with more online stuff, right? So I think it's understanding like the purpose of both of those things and how they work together. And I think we're just seeing that more and more. And again, it makes sense because when I think about how AI, for example, has impacted sales in particular, and I'm going to lump sales and recruiting together, it's just like outbound outreach to people you don't know. Let's call it that. Sequencing is now easier than ever before. I feel like every sourcing tool out there has a sequencing component to it, and sequencing is where you can just send a group of messages and you don't have to like follow up manually. You can just let it kind of play its course. And so now we're getting like overload of messages. Like everybody is like, it doesn't matter what your role is. It's like LinkedIn is really loud in the DMs. Your own email is really loud. Like you've got newsletters everywhere. You've got marketing seems to be pumping out. And so it's like this message overload. And this is why I'm such a huge fan of like meeting people, making that initial connection, and then nurturing them with the content, staying top of mind. And I just think as a recruiter, that's how you want to be thinking. Like, maybe the way that we initially connect with people and that cold outreach goes to more of that human aspect. And then we're using the content to just nurture and nurture and nurture. So as a team, how are you initially making those connections? How are you standing out? Now, do I think that if you have an online brand that's recognizable within your space, I actually then think cold outbound emails and in-mails, that also gets easier because people just know you, they're familiar with you. So it's kind of just understanding how all of these things work together and then building a strategy around that. But I think there's some digital fatigue. I think, and I see it a lot in like the newsletter space. Like it's like everybody's starting a newsletter now. Everybody's starting a podcast. Now, fundamentally, I don't even think that a lot of people are starting these things for the right reasons. So I don't think a lot of these things are going to last. Like you set up a podcast. This is easy to go a long time with it. Yeah. So just kind of coming up with these cohesive strategies as a team is essential. And then knowing how each piece works together as well.
And, I really like your idea of, the first meeting or trying to get the kind of connection with a contact or a prospect as an in-person and nurturing from that point onwards digitally. Do you think a lot of recruiting teams are set up in the right way to work like that? Do they have the capability from a CRM system or the tools that they need to do this stuff? What are you seeing with teams that you're partnering with?
I think most teams, and this has been like this forever, I think most teams, it's like it doesn't ever seem to be a balance. It's either like they're really overworked and they're stretched too thin, or they're like underworked and they don't have enough work to work on, and then everybody's worried about getting laid off. So I don't know whether there's ever I don't think I've ever really met too many recruiting teams who are like at this equilibrium. I think part of that is just the function of recruiting, right? It's going to always fluctuate based on the overall company. But I think like if I'm a talent leader, I'm thinking, okay, what are the events that are going on in my space where that talent is going to be at? So do you know what events those are? And then similar with it's kind of like how I said with online, like where are your people going to be? So thinking, okay, the people that we're looking to recruit, where are they spending time online? Where are they spending time offline? What events and conferences can we go to? And so then you have like an event strategy, just like marketing would have. Okay, what events do we need to be at? Where do we need to buy a booth? And I'm not suggesting that a recruiting team needs to buy a booth, but there could be value in sending your recruiters to these events just to make those connections. And then going, okay, we made these connections, we've gone to this event. Now where are those same people spending time online? Maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's Twitter or X, maybe it's TikTok, wherever it is, and then building the content strategy around that. And maybe that also is partnering with marketing on these things as well. Like just understanding, I think because outbound is getting harder, because just reaching people is getting harder. Maybe to compensate for the lack of resources, you got to partner up with some of the other business divisions and go, look, I know your primary function is generating leads for the business, but we understand marketing is really going to be important in our recruiting efforts as well. And so then you've got to be knowledgeable on marketing and social and how that impacts how you reach out to candidates as well.
Yeah. And when, for the nurturing side, would you recommend recruitment teams just use their ATS for that, for the nurturing, or would they use a more classically kind of revenue function platform like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, or the other tools that you would recommend that they can keep on top of people and kind of curate a community?
I mean, look, I feel like there's a lot of ATSs now that are coming out with more of like that CRM function in there. So I think it's really researching whatever, I mean, looking at the ATS you have right now, obviously, and going, okay, do you have some capability to be able to market to people and to be able to do that? Do we need to create a candidate community, that's putting out really, really good content? I think the challenge with this is within a business, you're always going to be competing against marketing for some of this stuff. But I think, that's why I said it's like that education piece. I think you've got to kind of educate yourself on some of these tools and go, okay, how could we strategically use the CRM? And then an easy one is just social, like social, social isn't a massive investment outside of time. So then looking at, okay, do we have a really clear 20 to 30 minutes? Like I'm going to use LinkedIn as the example here. Can you tell me that your team has a clear 20 to 30 minute strategy on LinkedIn every single day? That you know who your recruiters are connecting to, you know what content they're sharing, and you know what content they're creating. If you could say yes, great. If you don't, then I think you're missing out in an area of opportunity. So looking at that avenue first, and then again looking at your ATS right now and going, okay, what CRM capabilities do we have? And maybe it's marketing. That's how we're going to reach these people, through email, direct email, right? Because we've got an ATS that has that information. But I feel like a lot of ATSs now are coming up with those capabilities in there as well. But obviously that's a huge investment within itself if you've got an ATS you've worked with for a long time.
Yeah. And I think you probably go through this when you're speaking to clients, yourself. But I'm sure talent leaders go through this as well with their bosses and trying to sign off budget for events or trying to sign off budget for tools. And when they're passionate about doing this brand awareness and using this new method of like candidate generation, really, which is definitely, I feel, is the future of how companies are going to be working. Is there a kind of a way that you feel leaders should present this, or that they can convince their stakeholders to get budget or show the importance of something like this, or these kind of methods?
I think you got to implement the low cost options first to create some data around why this is actually working. So I think you got to start at the lowest point of entry, which again, that's why I'm so passionate about LinkedIn content, because it's free. There's no real cost outside of that time component. So start to build that case with data. I also think if you want to, like, events is a great one. Build up your own brand so you can just get invited to those events, right? So then maybe it's not an investment that the company's having to make. And then I think you've got to always present everything with the data that backs it. And I think this is a challenge. So my challenge for anyone listening to this, if you're like, hey, yeah, branding and events, this all sounds great. Start with the lowest hanging fruit, which is the LinkedIn content, the LinkedIn strategy, and then start to look at the metrics that you're measuring by. Start to show time to fill is going down, the quality of candidates we're bringing in. Say, hey, we just got this. Remember Joe, the director of engineering? Yeah, that came from a LinkedIn post. That came from a direct message to one of our recruiters because of content they've seen. Start to tell that story, right? So you're telling the story with the data, and then also like just almost like testimonials, like you're building a business. And then you can go to leadership and say, yep, you know what? I think the next step of these events, here's an event. Let's try it out. And then have a strategy when you go to the event. Have your recruiters start to meet up with candidates that you're going to want to hire, you want a relationship with. And again, you get the success stories, and that's how you tell the story, and you bring it for the next event as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure that those steps are really kind of low hanging fruit, and can create big impact. I mean, I've been trying to be consistent on LinkedIn for the last year or so, and it's hard to, I don't know how you put out the amount of content that you put out. I mean, it seems a lot easier to do than people I think realize. But I think it's when you hit that consistency is when you start seeing results. It's been really wild to see how your kind of your following has grown and your kind of brand has grown. But it's down to that consistency, right? I know that you're really passionate about kind of the kind of future trends and specific kind of Gen Z. You're kind of big on TikTok. You put a lot of time into that. Is there anything that you see and companies should be thinking about with this kind of next wave of talent that's coming into businesses and how they're looking to make decisions?
Yeah, look, I think the common thread that I see, with Gen Z and just people who are coming into the workforce is there's a lot more of that entrepreneurial spirit. And I think this is because of what we've seen on social. There's a lot more people talking about being an entrepreneur. Like, I just compare it to when I started in the workforce. It was like entrepreneur was like, there's only like one or two crazy people that could ever think of doing it. And it just wasn't as widespread. But now with social media, it's like there's a lot more entrepreneurial people that have really, really leveraged social media to build that business. And so from an outside lens, it's attractive, right? When you see people on social and they're talking about these big things, you then go, well, what's stopping me from that? And so I think from like a business perspective, that's a big shift. But when I look at like what actually kind of why that's even attractive, I think it's almost like two or three small things. So like one big piece is flexibility, or at least a feeling of flexibility. So what I mean by the feeling of flexibility is, I'm not suggesting that everybody just goes where they want to go willy-nilly and there's no accountability, but I think it's really taking a hard look and going, okay, are we required, like something simple, like are we requiring like a doctor's note for somebody to go to a doctor? Like, do people feel like afraid that they got to ask permission to do kind of the things in their life that come up? And I know these things are easier said than done. And there's accountability in there as well. So I'm talking about if somebody's getting the results that you're holding them to, and they're a top performer, can you give flexibility? Are there ways that you can structure their schedule so they feel like, hey, okay, I can pick my own schedule here? And again, things start impacting with the results and the work that's being produced. That's a different conversation. I'm talking about the people who are performing. So I think flexibility is huge. And then to kind of tied in with that is control. So people want to feel like they can control their work, like their job isn't all encompassing of their life, right? And I think this is a big shift that just happened really with COVID. And it's not just Gen Z. I think everybody kind of feels this way, where people really want to be able to structure their work around their life. So it's like flexibility and control, I think, are two really, really big components. And then the third one potentially could be just having a voice. And I think this is one which, if you're a small to medium-sized business, this one is a huge competitive advantage you can have over really, really large companies. Because I think in really large companies, people just feel like, I don't even have a voice. Like, I say something, who cares? I'm just speaking into a vacuum. And so I think this maybe isn't as applicable to like millennials and Gen X. I don't think they care as much, but I know with Gen Z, having a voice is huge. And I think this is why TikTok is such a powerful platform, because it's just given so many people a voice. Like, you can just get on your phone and you could do a video about whatever. It could be about any topic, and it goes viral, and instantly you have this feeling of like, oh, I've got a voice. Like, people are listening to me. So like, how as employers, like, are you giving your people a voice, right? So control, flexibility, and voice. If you're able to give those things to employees, I think you're really able to attract, top people. And then the fourth one would be pay, which is hard to compete with. But I even think with pay, like people are kind of like understanding like, hey, when you get paid a lot, you got to put in a lot, right? I think there's more of an understanding of that as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think the voice piece is crucial, and you're seeing a lot. And yeah, the entrepreneurial thing, I kind of feel like it'd be interesting to see the curve of once people have been an entrepreneur, if they like it as much as they think they would. Like have a little graph of like their opinion on entrepreneurship after they've been an entrepreneur.
That's how it is sometimes, right? It's like sometimes you got to actually jump in to
Yeah.
figure that out, whether or not that is you, and then go, okay, well, actually, no, I really appreciate the things that a 9 to 5 can give me, the stability, which again, like stability, is there any stability? You could argue that there's zero stability in jobs, but then you have to worry about the accounting, the marketing, and the sales. And to your point, it's not obviously as easy as people think or people make it out to be. But I think just, I don't know, like I got together with a guy the other week who's 21, and it was like he just had such a, like he just wanted to start his own thing so bad, but just didn't know what to start. And I said, well, look, my best advice to you would be go work for 5 to 10 years, and then just always be thinking, what are the things I like and what are the things I'm good at, and let that kind of lead the road, and work at a variety of companies. Maybe you work at a huge, company, a massive corporation, and then work at a startup and kind of get a feel, and then look at, are there certain aspects that I like and what aspects do I not like? And then with that, again, that goal in mind of, okay, the things that I'm good at and the things I like, can I monetize this and create a business on the back end? But it is interesting. Like I never asked him, like, why do you want to do this? And maybe I should.
Yeah.
That's it. So
Absolutely. I think at the heart of it, every great business is solving a problem, right? Like, and if you, and to know what problem to solve, you have to have some experience in that, feeling that pain yourself, and being around the problem. Like exactly like, we're doing exactly how you're doing. You've seen from your experience, like there's this real big opportunity here and there's this problem to solve. I think it'd be really hard to do that if you're just coming straight out of uni. I mean, some people definitely do it and are very successful, but I can imagine it's a lot harder to do than actually being around the problem and then, going out and finding a new way to fix it. This leads me on, as we're wrapping up, to the kind of final question. Joel, there's a lot changing in recruiting, at the moment with artificial intelligence, even just like the ways of working, tools people are using, fractional work, all this kind of stuff that could really shift the landscape. Is there something that you're particularly excited about around the kind of future of recruiting and TA?
The biggest thing I'm excited about is, I think just seeing a lot more people. I mean, even though we were talking about entrepreneurial just a second ago and like what that is, but I've seen a huge shift in, I think, recruiters that, maybe if they've been in recruitment for 10, 15 years and they've been laid off a couple times, I've seen a huge shift in people, really starting up their own operations and starting up their own shops recently. So I'm excited about that. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I think what it's going to do is I think it's going to make internal teams just think differently about how they structure as well and how they do things. And so obviously being on the agency side, it's exciting because it probably means a lot of opportunity for like agency recruiters. So I think that's one big piece I'm excited about. And then I am excited about all of the AI tools as well. I know there's always that kind of fear that it's going to like replace what recruiters do, but pretty much every tool that I've seen just makes your life easier. And so my challenge to whether you're a leader or you're an individual contributor, be that person in the business that's really looking into these tools. Like I had someone on my show last week, and he said that he just takes on like 2 or 3 tech demos a week. He's an agency owner just to learn about the tech, to learn what's out there. And I love that approach, and just being that student and looking at, okay, are there some tools that can like really save time or help out with problems? Like there's scheduling tools now powered by AI. There's transcription tools that can summarize. There's obviously like sourcing tools out there. But that's exciting to me because I think then it creates, more of that focus on the human side of our jobs, and like, how do we get better at really having those conversations, understanding people. And I'm more excited about that than fearful of it taking recruiters' jobs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's going to change, I think, the recruiter's job for the better, probably. But yeah, people need to get on board. Awesome, man. I really appreciate your time and a lot of really helpful, impactful kind of tips there for people who want to build our brand and have that impact on their recruiting efforts. Where can people find you? outside of this podcast?
Yeah, you can just go to www.therealistrecruiter.com. That's my website. It's got all my social links. And then if you just search my name, Joel Lalgee, I am the only Joel Lalgee in the world. So there's no competition for SEO space on that. But yeah, you can just go there. And then I would say in terms of like just trying to reach out to me, if you go to my LinkedIn, there's a work with me link on the profile. If you just click that, it will give you kind of more information of what I offer. And yeah, happy to connect with people over there.
Awesome, Joel. Well, thanks a lot and catch you soon.
All right, Chris, take care, man. Appreciate it.